There's no doubt that vintage clothes are some of the most profitable items in all of reselling. But if you want to make the most money possible on vintage items, pricing matters more than almost anything else. Well, hey, my name is LeeMeier, and I've made well over $100,000 net profit flipping used clothes online. And I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of resellers just like you. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see resellers make is pricing vintage items in the same way as you price modern clothes. But the truth is, vintage is completely different. And when you price it correctly, it can actually pay you substantially more. Stick around because I'm breaking it all down here coming up. Welcome to the Empowered Reseller, where you gotta just list it. Here's the biggest difference with vintage clothes. Most pieces are one of a kind. That's a good thing because you're not usually competing with hundreds of other listings, and it's not just a race to the bottom. But it also poses some problems. I hear from people all the time that say things like, I can't find the exact comp. I get that frustration, but it's actually not a problem. It's actually your advantage. If buyers can't find the same thing for cheaper, you have leverage. And if you're willing to be patient, you actually give yourself room to be able to make more profit. You can get more money right from the get-go when you price your items higher. And you can do that when the item is truly hard to replace and you're not seeing a lot of other available listings out there. This is what I call replacement difficulty. If you couldn't easily find another one tomorrow, that's your cue to price higher. Not emotionally, but strategically. And this is where that patience really pays off. Let me show you what I mean. This is a women's LL Bean chore coat in floral print, size 3X. Now in this case, there's one sold listing, but when you look at available listings, there's none that have floral print in size 3X. So when you're listing an item like this, you can get away with asking for more because there's not other options out there. It's being a smart business owner. That's what you are as a reseller. And you're reading the market to be able to make the most profit and make it most worth your time. Now, not all vintage should be priced high and held on to forever. You'll want to be a little bit more realistic in your pricing when the vintage item is fairly common and you're seeing other comparable listings available. This is one place where the sell-through rate matters more than just maximizing your profit. Here's the difference. With this vintage Planet Hollywood jean jacket, there's 203 available listings just from the Las Vegas location alone. This is a place where there's a handful of sold listings, so not a super high sell-through rate, but they're still selling for a decent amount. The point being, buyers have options, and in this case, holding onto the item is probably not worth it in the long run. You're better off pricing it competitively and moving the item. That'll actually make you more money in the long term. Auction or buy it now? This is a question that I get constantly. For most items, especially vintage, one-of-a-kind items, the buy it now option is going to be your safer option. Let me explain. Auctions really only work when there's a lot of buyers watching at the same time, competing and bidding that item up. The demand has to be there to make that auction the best choice. For most one-of-a-kind vintage items, the demand just isn't there and an auction could go sideways really fast. I've seen this happen way too often. 99-cent sales, $1.99 sales. This is a great example of a one-of-a-kind vintage item that somebody made the mistake of listing on auction really cheap and with free shipping. Huge mistake because that sold for barely anything, $1. That doesn't even cover shipping. They actually lost money on this item after having to pay for the shipping label. There just weren't enough bidders. Hey, it happens to the best of us, myself included. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Now, of course, there's always exceptions, things like Filson coats and Jinko jeans. These usually have a high enough demand to create bidding wars. For example, this Filson red buffalo plaid Mackinac jacket, it had 27 bids on it and went for $173. And this one had 11 bids and went for $331. But Jinko and Filson are some of the exceptions, not the rule. You'll always want to look at two things. First, comparing the number of available listings to the number of sold listings. If you're seeing a ton of sold listings, more than what is available, yes, that happens. That is a good indicator that it's time to run an auction. The second thing that really helps to look at when you're deciding to do a buy it now or auction is to actually filter down to sold listings that sold by auction and see if there's a lot of bidding wars going on. See if the prices are getting bid up and how many bids the items are getting. If you're seeing green flags on those two things, then an auction might be a good call. Hey, if this is helping you so far, hit that thumbs up. Most vintage doesn't sit forever because it's unsellable. It sits most of the time because the item is priced way too high. Maybe you priced it based off of emotion. Or maybe you have unreal expectations and you're expecting an instant sale. I hear from a lot of people that start to panic after a week or two of an item being listed and they're going, where are my views? Where are my sales? Why hasn't this item sold? With one-of-a-kind items, with vintage items, you don't usually need to panic. You usually just need more time. This is a good example of where the item is priced high, but it actually makes sense. This is a vintage Cowichan horse sweater. There is nothing else like it out there. Some similar items, but nothing quite the same. When I pulled this listing, it had 36 watchers and 42 views in the last 24 hours. And by looking at comparable sold items that maybe are not necessarily identical, but they're similar, you can see where the $120 price is justified. And on the flip side, this is an example where the price is probably way too high and there's not the data to back up that asking price. This is an available listing of a vintage surf shirt. It's listed for $550. It does have 36 watchers, but a lot of times just having a high number of watchers does not necessarily mean the item is going to sell for anywhere near that. When we look at comparable sales, the pricing just isn't there. By the way, I'm showing comparable sales using eBay's filtering down to sold items, but the prices are not actually probably correct. It's just a little bit easier to show on my screen. If you want to find out the actual prices of comparable sales, even when a best offer was accepted, I do have a video on that I will link to somewhere up here. Quick note here, pricing is one of the things that I help my VIPs with inside of the Empowered Reseller, so that they can price confidently and actually make the most money for what they're selling. If that's something you're interested in, the link is down below. And if you're not quite ready for that step, I have a free brand list, a free keyword list that will help make you more profitable. Everything is linked down below, so let's keep going. This is one of the most common questions I get. How long do I wait before dropping my prices? If you listed something a week ago and it hasn't sold yet, that's not a problem. It's unrealistic expectations. With vintage, I wouldn't panic unless it's been several months, even 6 to 12 months, depending on how unique the item is. That doesn't mean that it can't sell quickly, but it does mean that patience pays off here. Again, don't panic, that's sometimes easier said than done, and don't make any huge cuts. Sometimes just a small adjustment will do the trick. Well, how do I balance my sell-through and maximizing profit? It really comes down to one question. Do you need the cash flow now, or can you afford to wait? If you're just getting started and you need the money to be able to go and source more items, you might be better off pricing more aggressively. But once you've got some cash built up, some inventory built up, you can afford to wait for the right buyer. Neither's wrong, it depends on your situation. Just try to price intentionally and not desperately. Buyers pick up on that. Now that you know how to price vintage items correctly, the next step is knowing which vintage items are actually worth sourcing. Because let's face it, pricing gets easier when you're confident in the item itself. Just click or tap the screen to watch the next video where I break down the best vintage clothing to be sourcing right now. Click here and I'll see you there.